I've always told people, and some people think I'm crazy, but it's like being in the desert and coming into an oasis when you get to Pullman. And I think unless you went to school there, you don't quite get that.
No doubt.
You get that, I mean, do you still get that feeling when you come down the hill where it
Oh,
just
yeah.
kind of lifts you up?
And you start to see like Bryan Clock Tower
Yep.
and everything, and yeah, most definitely. And I have a friend that says it's actually for him, it's when you turn off of 195 and that sign points left to Pullman. He's like,
Yeah.
I love that sign. Like
Yeah.
that's my favorite sign, like right there.
Everybody, welcome back to the Ben and Sway Show. Today we have a guest that's probably needs no introduction for a lot of people around Spokane, but Derek Deis with KXOY4, and among other things you do with the Cougs. So
Yeah.
welcome aboard. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me. As I said before we started here, it's a little weird for me to be on the other side of an interview for
so
the
you
change.
can critique this whatever you'd like.
Yeah.
No, it's a pleasure to sit with you. We've worked together in the past on Made in the Northwest a couple times now. Just recently, what was that, 2 weeks ago? And really appreciate you doing that. And it actually is similar to what we're trying to do, is highlight the cool stuff that's going on in and around Spokane. I think I'd like to get your perspective on this, being in it all the time. But I think right now is as exciting as it's been in my lifetime in and around Spokane. A lot of things going on with businesses and with Gonzaga doing so well, the Cougs are doing well, so sports-wise it's fun. Lots of development, lots of startups in Spokane. Yeah. What's your perspective on Spokane in this day and age?
So like you, I grew up a little more than an hour from Spokane. I grew up in Moses Lake. And so my grandmother actually was in the Seattle area. So we went west more than we came east, right? And kind of my perception of Spokane was kind of a sleepy little town. But I always kind of thought to myself when I went into broadcasting, like, that's where I want to be for my second job, right? You start a small town. For me, it was Tri-Cities and Yakima. And I wanted to be in Spokane because, again, I was in sports at the time, so covering the Cougs, all that kind of stuff was a big draw for me. And then you kind of move here, and remember, downtown, it was like ghost town for a while.
For a long time.
And it was like, how do we revive this city? And you're right.
Like mid to late 90s,
Yeah.
early 2000s?
Yeah, for sure. And like everything pushed, Northtown was a thing. And then like
Right.
Valley Mall was a thing. And everything was pushing out and nothing was happening here in the downtown core. And now in the last few years, we've seen like so much of that come back. I think Visit Spokane has done like an awesome job marketing our city. The convention center's been a huge deal, drawing events in. And there was just, I believe it was Golf Digest or something, just talking about what a great golf destination Spokane is, with all the cheap courses, and you can play this and this and this for less than $50. And it's neat to see that kind of attention being drawn on our city.
Absolutely. So you grew up in Moses Lake, end up going to WSU. Did you always know you wanted to go to WSU? Did it just kind of happen? And
No, this is a funny story. I was actually just telling it to some of my coworkers this morning. I'm sorry, Coug fans. I grew up a Husky fan. I know that's hard for some people to fathom now, but my older brother was a UW graduate. He graduated in business school there. And so in Moses Lake, it's probably, I don't know, 70-30 Cougs to Huskies.
Right.
But my best friend and I were both big time Husky fans. Like I had a Coug or a Huskies like starter jacket when I was like in junior high and stuff. And when I decided to go into broadcasting, it was kind of like, first it was like, oh, I gotta go to Wazoo for that, And then of course you get to WSU and you fall in love with the place and it gets in your blood. But that best friend of mine actually still works for UW. He works in the business office for athletics. So we always joke it's the only thing we ever don't see eye to eye on is Huskies and Cougs.
It's ironic that you said that, because there's a young girl that's the daughter of some friends of ours we go on the boat with, and we've got a host of Huskies that actually graduated from UW that always razz us all the time, and it's nice because they're in Colville, so it's easy to razz them back because there's way more Cougs than Huskies.
Right.
But the guy that's probably the biggest Husky fan, had season tickets, would drive over for the games. His daughter ends up going to WSU, and she was telling me this story, I think it was over the 4th. She says, hey, I just have to tell you this. Like, I was going to WSU as a Husky fan, like, not going to change. I was going to WSU because I had to.
That was her mindset.
And she said, And then I ended up getting a job at the Evergreen, and then I ended up covering sports, and then game day came to town, and I could care less about the Huskies now. I am all in. And I said, it's pretty funny because there's a lot of people that have their like Cougar moment, and it's they get there and then it's like, I'm here. And then, we went to school with people that came and went,
Sure.
and that just wasn't for them. But I think that's what makes WSU so great. And it really speaks to the region, I think, because the people that are Cougar fans, I mean, there's some exceptions to this, but that aren't associated with the university, they really associate it with the region. It's that rural mentality. It's that you drive through
Sure.
the Palouse to get to Pullman. I've always told people, and some people think I'm crazy, but it's like being in the desert and coming into an oasis when you get to Pullman. And I think unless you went to school there, you don't quite get that.
No doubt.
You get that. I mean, do you still get that feeling when you come down the hill where it
Oh,
just
yeah.
kind of lifts you up?
And you start to see like Bryan Clock Tower
Yep.
and everything, and yeah, most definitely. And I have a friend that says it's actually for him, it's when you turn off of 195 and that sign points left to Pullman. He's like,
Yeah.
I love that sign. Like
Yeah.
that's my favorite sign, like right there. But and my wife went to Marquette University in Milwaukee, which I like to describe to people as kind of the Gonzaga of the Midwest, right? It's a Jesuit school, big time basketball program, no football program. So I was like, first of all, your parents paid $30,000 for you to go somewhere where you don't even get a football team.
Right.
That's kind of a ripoff, in my opinion. But so she's like adopted the Cougs
probably
over the years.
used to pay $30,000.
Yeah, right.
Now, who
Probably
knows
much
what it
more.
is.
You're right. Yeah, so she's adopted the Cougs, and I think the Cougs have kind of adopted her back, and she's as diehard as it gets.
So since we're on the Cougs, let's talk a little bit about your role with the Cougs now. You do a show down there. I see you down there all the time pre-game, and then you've got post-game, and I hear you on the radio going home. Why don't you talk a little bit about how that goes and what do you love most about that?
I love everything about it. It's awesome. And the funny thing is, I came to Spokane as a sports guy in 2004. So end of Doba years into the Paul Wolf years. So
I don't even know what you're talking about.
No, right. This was some dark times. And so I was in sports here for I think 7 years, maybe. Not a single bowl game. We sniffed it one year. Remember the 6-6 year
Oh,
where
yeah,
we
I
didn't get
remember.
the bowl bid?
Yeah, James Harrison.
Right, exactly. And so then I left sports and turned to news in 2011. I was like, man, I'm never going to get to cover like a good Wazoo team. And in 2013, I was approached by a couple of guys, Justin Felker and Matt Allman, who are no longer with
Know them
WSU.
both, yeah.
Yeah, and they asked me if I wanted to host the pregame show. And I'm like, yeah, let's do this. Sign me up. And I didn't exactly know what I was doing, but it was sort of like trial by fire. And my first game was at Jordan-Hare Stadium in Auburn.
I was there.
And I'm filling 90 minutes with mostly just me. I think I had like one or two guests the whole time. And it's just, I'm basically reading off game notes and trying to fill this time. And overtime, so now I think this year will be, 2013? So this will be my 7th year.
Wow.
Doing the broadcast, and it's just become something I really look forward to, and planning out those shows and making sure we've got
You're
great
getting lots
guests.
of cool guests.
Yeah, for
So-
sure. And then I think it was, 2015, the year we lost to Portland State in the season opener. That was my first post-game show, like hosting the call-in show where callers can come in and talk about the game, and we just lost to Portland State in a driving rain. And I'm telling you, I was more terrified than I've ever been to go on air, because I'm like, oh my God, this is my first show. People are going to be dropping F-bombs. They're going to be like asking for Coach Leach's job. Somebody better be on the dump button in case, somebody cusses on the air. And that was the first one, and I got through that, and it's been pretty smooth sailing since, except for the Apple Cup's kind of
Yeah,
tough.
the Apple Cup last. I remember we were. I think we talked about it afterwards, but there was a lot of talk about, can we cover Martin Stadium? Can we heat the field?
Right.
Can we do something not to have that disaster again? But it always seems like we have something like that. But it's that's cool. I like seeing you out there and seeing you get Alex Brink up there. You got other guys that are coming up there and giving commentary. That's got to be a lot of fun to relive some of those old days with those guys, knowing what they did for Cougar football, and then get their take on what's happening now.
Yeah, for sure. And so when I first started again in Spokane, Alex was the wide-eyed redshirt freshman quarterback that was thrust into the starting role, and we always felt bad for him. I'm like, here's this, 19-year-old kid, and we're cameras in your face like every week when we're down there, and he just wasn't quite ready for it at the time.
Yeah.
I'm talking from a media responsibility portion, and it's awesome to see him now, because now you get to see these guys that they've grown up and now they're mid-30s,
Right.
and he handles himself so well.
Well,
in
he's
those
great on the
broadcasts. He's
radio.
awesome, and even my wife will say, like, when I listen to Alex, I learned something about the game I didn't know before, and then I can tell my friends, Alex told me to watch for these keys, and I'm watching it happen as it plays out in the game. And so Jed Collins was another one that I covered, and now he's on the broadcast with us. Grady Emerson was a guy, was at school at the same time you and I were. He and I played high school football against each other, and I actually kind of roped him in last year and said, you're going to do this, and I hope you're on board. So
it's funny Brent mentioned Jed, because he's a business guy, and he and I are constantly, we see each other in feeds on LinkedIn all the time. And he's, I would say, 90% not football, a little bit of football, but he had a really successful career in the NFL and all that, and that's pretty neat. Another thing that is interesting and really shapes Cougar football is Steve Gleason and everything that he's done. And I've been a part, fortunately, a number of times with fundraisers that they've done. That's been a real big deal for Cougars and for Cougar sports, and I think that a lot of people are afraid to talk about it because he's wheelchair bound, but the things that guy has done, I think, really exemplifies the region, Spokane, the Cougs, and then what he did as part of that New Orleans Saints team. And I think the thing that really got me was seeing the video when we did the golf tournament 2 years ago, where he and some of his teammates, they went down to Machu Picchu, and struck me then, and I guess I should have thought of it before, but he's done so much more with this debilitating ALS situation than most people able-bodied will ever do in a lifetime. Right. And it's amazing. What have you had any interactions with the Gleason Foundation, some of the stuff they've done? What's your take on that?
A little bit. And actually, I'll give the plug right now. Gleason Fest is coming up on August 10th at Riverfront Park there. So if you can get down there, I'll be emceeing again
Incredible
this year.
Cause.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. And Gleason was always like around when we were in school, right? He was in another fraternity. He was friends with a lot of guys in my fraternity. I can't tell you that I was really good friends with him.
Yeah.
Like, he knew me, and I knew who he was, and that's about the extent of it. But you're right. I mean, you hate to see ALS, strike anybody.
Right.
But Steve is such a great. That's a terrible way to say it again, right? But for it to happen to someone like Steve, I think sheds a different light because of his. I'm not going to let this beat me. The whole no white flag thing,
amazing.
And what he's been able to do to inspire other people with ALS. Like this doesn't have to be a death diagnosis. If you have
technology with eye gaze that he's just worked with Microsoft on, and and that's going to have so many implications. At Vaughan Timbers, we're working with Blockhouse to develop technology for smart structures, and part of that is tied in with another ALS charity called Matt's Place in Coeur d'Alene. We're trying to build houses for ALS patients because they're so unique, and our mass timber allows us to do that. But the stuff that Steve and the Gleason Foundation have done with the technology is allowing people to actually live free lives, other than before where there wasn't that ability to communicate. I mean, think about that. If he hadn't developed that, he goes and gives, when we do the golf tournament, he gives like 5 or 6 minutes of commentary, speech, through the eye gaze technology, and it still has the same Steve Gleason humor that I got to know when we were in college together.
He's one of the best follows on Twitter because he's hilarious.
He is, and he's still doing it. And it's just, it just shines a light on what people can do if they just really focus on it. And I think social media and the stuff we're doing here at Ben and Sway allows a situation like that to get shared throughout the world. The Ice Bucket Challenge would not have happened without social media. And so I think that it's just really, in a sad situation in many respects, he's made that into an enormous win for people that wouldn't have had a champion otherwise.
Yeah, how many people were aware of ALS before in this area,
Yeah.
before Steve really, and to put a face to it, and someone who is so determined not to let it define him and continue
Yeah.
to live his life and do all the things we have. It's just amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's shift a little bit now to talk about Spokane, and I'd like to hear one or two examples of from Made in the Northwest when you go out and do those shows, something that really caught your attention, that blew you away, that you didn't know was going on in Spokane, that's really in your mind creating a difference for the area.
Well, one or two will make it really hard, honestly.
Well,
So
you just pick one. Just pick any that you think. But
I started doing these Made in the Northwest stories in 2012. It was like late 2011, I think. ABC started doing Made in America stories with David Muir, and they still do them from time to time. But my news director at the time thought we should do Made in the Northwest because there's a lot of cool stuff going on around here that nobody really knows about. And initially, it was kind of a different reporter each week would just get assigned, hey, you go do this one. And about 6 months into it, they kind of asked me, hey, do you want to just take over the franchise? And I was like, sure. I don't know much about manufacturing, honestly, but I can try to go tell a story when we do this. And the very first one I did was the WSU Creamery and Cougar Gold cheese and stuff like that. And it took off from there. And we started with some of the obvious ones around the area, like Lighthouse Foods and Buck Knives and some of the really big ones that people know about. But now, 7+ years into it, I counted them maybe 6-8 months ago, and I had done close to 250 original stories. And probably a lot of people don't even think there are 250 manufacturing companies in this area. But when you talk about, because I've gone from like Libby, Montana, right east to Moses Lake, west, and then up you guys in Colville, and even further all the way down to Lewis and Clarkston area. So when you think about that whole inland Northwest, there really are a lot of cool things happening locally, and again, not just in Spokane, but there's a big pocket of manufacturing in Colville. Hughes Craft and Colmac, and your company is up there, and then Sandpoint's got a bunch of stuff. Everything along Celtice Way and like Post Falls into Coeur d'Alene, there's a bunch of them there. Great stuff happening out at the Spokane Industrial Park off of Sullivan in the Valley. So there are really a lot of cool ones. But if you ask for a couple that really kind of stand out, I'll go back. This is again probably late 2012, early 2013. Gravity Jack, the guys in Liberty Lake, I don't know if you've encountered them, but they do augmented reality stuff. And the things that they're able to do is really just amazing. And applying it to things like when you turn pages of a magazine, that you can see their augmented reality ads pop up at you. And again, this was like 2013, so I need to go back in there and talk to them again and see how their technology is advanced. But that was the first one that really just like blew my mind. And another one now that I just went to maybe February, some guys in Coeur d'Alene who do continuous composites. And it's right down there, and they're able to do 3D printing in free space.
I've heard about
which
that.
is something I've never seen before. And there are a bunch of really young guys, really sharp guys who are doing something that is right on the cutting edge. And they won some award in Paris recently, just because I follow them on Facebook and Twitter now. Get to see that. But that's another one that I was like, when they demonstrate their stuff, I'm like, how are you doing that? That's amazing.
I'm pretty sure they probably got the award at the composite show that I was just talking about yesterday.
It might have been,
Because that's in Paris.
Okay.
So that's pretty cool stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, composites are a whole different world. And, we're at in timber, what we're trying to do is, we've got a 200-year-old process that's been going on and getting better and better. But there are some new technologies like, free space 3D printing. That's an augmented reality. How do you take all these technologies and make each step along the way better? And I think that's what's happening. And you mentioned a couple other spaces out there at the West Plains. They've got some really cool things going too. That's all coming together very rapidly. And you've got Amazon, of course, everybody recognizes that, but that announcement with Mullen Technologies, they're going to be doing their lithium-ion batteries, and then that two-seat sports car. The two-seat sports car in Spokane, that's something new and exciting. And I think that there's going to be more and more up there, because one of the things, and we've also interviewed Mayor David Condon, one of the things that he did with his exposure, he just saw that Spokane was so ripe for manufacturing, for startups, because one of the things that he and Charlie Wolf and his office have done is they've gone out and compared, if you had a certain amount of capital to start your business and you went and plopped it down in Silicon Valley, how long would you last before you'd have to go get more money or go out of business? Seattle and then Spokane. And I think it's almost 2.5 times the distance or the runway that you have by operating in Spokane. And I've certainly seen a lot of that. I think that's super cool, and it speaks to the type of people that are here. It speaks to the educational systems and how they've adapted over time, because WSU has, I mean, you talk football and just the school, but some of the things that the schools doing, different schools are doing out there are spectacular.
Yeah.
And then it's really also been cool, and like your opinion on it, how the area universities have come together to form the U District here downtown. I think that's something that's really going to add a tremendous amount of value to Spokane. And you know, Gonzaga really didn't have to do anything because it's right there. But Whitworth's got their thing there, Eastern and WSU and the medical school. That's big stuff from those days where Spokane was pretty sleepy and quiet downtown.
Yeah, most definitely. And look at just all the things that the Elson S. Floyd School of Medicine is doing already, and how they're branching out and trying to get residential doctors into rural areas and hope that they stay, because these are areas that are starved for trained medical professionals who will stay in those communities long term, and that's a big part of their mission there. But it really is cool. Just, I mean, every time you drive by there, it's like there's a new building going up, or there's something going on, and it is a great opportunity for all those students to be able to come through there, live in Spokane, and say, hey, maybe this is a place I want to stick around professionally as well.
So, is there anything that we need to know about Derek Deis and what you're doing outside of what we've talked about so far? I mean, it's not a little amount, but you're doing all kinds of cool stuff, and I just want to know, is there something else that you're working on, paying attention to out there in the space that really excites you?
No, I mean, I am super wrapped up in my son's lives, and that's, people don't understand, well, why would you want to wake up at 2:30 every morning, come to work at 3:30, and really the best part of it is I'm done by noon usually, and I get to spend all afternoon with my boys. Again, they're 10 and 8 right now, so I coach soccer.
They're pretty good. You're a pretty good follow with the kids on social media.
I coach basketball, and my older one plays football as well. My younger one also just got done playing his summer baseball season last night. So yeah, I really enjoy my schedule because it allows me to be a family man for the rest of my day. Whereas when I was doing sports happen at night, right?
Yeah.
So the schedule is basically like 2:30 in the afternoon to close to midnight every day. And then sports happen on Saturdays.
Yeah.
So you kind of got to work Saturdays too. And then once we had kids, I was like, man, this is all I ever wanted to do, was do sports on TV, and then it really got to be difficult with finding time for the family, and so the switch to mornings was really, really great for me. But yeah, that's pretty much it. It's me and the boys when I'm not at work or doing like the Cougar broadcast.
Yeah, I just saw your last video with your, I think it was your youngest with the electric scooter in the park. he did have it covered pretty well, didn't he?
Right, exactly.
That's cool. Well, how can people follow you and the things you're doing on social media? Where are you at? How do they follow you?
Well, you can follow all the KXOY accounts for sure on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, what have you. For me, Twitter, it's at Derek KXOY, DEREK, the proper spelling, not RRICK. Derek Deis KXOY on Facebook, Instagram as well, Derek Deis. So
yeah, that's cool. Well, thanks for coming on and thanks for sharing. It's always exciting to talk about Cougar football. Sorry, any Husky fans that are out there.
We might have to do a separate episode on just that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thanks, Derek. It's been a pleasure.
Awesome, man. Thanks for having me.